It doesn't matter what you're capable of doing if you're not mentally capable of actually doing it. Mental toughness to me is a lot different than physical toughness. I think a lot of times people these days, they're in the media talking about that player isn't tough. To me, it's just what do you want? And if you want it bad enough, you're willing to do whatever it takes to get it. And then you gotta go all in with like this relentless mentality that is like, you know what? I might fall on my face, but that's okay. I am going to see what I'm really truly capable of. Reframe the question from what do you want, because that doesn't really matter, to what do you need to do to get to what you want, and then are you willing to do that? Because that's the real question that matters.
How do you build confidence? Confidence can come through preparation, through talent, through experience. Today you're going to meet somebody who helps people cultivate confidence, not just in their ability, but in their skills in specific. This individual doesn't like to lie to himself, doesn't want people to lie to themselves. And in fact, he's releasing a book about not bullshitting yourself. And I think you're going to appreciate what this particular individual has to say. He's a winner. He's a coach. He's a trainer, an athlete, and so much more. And about to be a published author of his second book, Stop Bullshitting Yourself. Please welcome NBA skills coach Drew Hanlon. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be on here with you.
Me too, man. It's pretty cool having done the research and now getting the chance to talk to you. Obviously, the reputation precedes. But I think an optimal place to start is I was actually listening to a Kobe interview, listening to Kobe talk about failure. He was talking about how it's exciting, thrilling. What's your take about failure?
Yeah, I think it's part of the process. I don't think that anybody's ever found perfect success. I don't think there is such thing as perfect success. I think that if you look in basketball specifically, you got Michael Jordan, who in my opinion is the greatest player of all time, who missed half of his shots. You look at Steph Curry, who's the greatest three-point shooter of all time, who misses 55% of his shots. You look at, Tiger Woods, who's missed putts. You look at, even the best boxers of all time have got knocked down. So, I think that the biggest thing is, it's the way you look at failure. To me, when people ask me, like, what is the biggest moment of failure in your career? I'm like, I don't really look at anything as being a failure moment. I think to me, failure means if you get knocked down and you hear the 10 count, but if you get knocked down and stay down for 9 and get up, I feel like that's part of the process, and so you have to learn from your mistakes. You have to learn from the things that trouble you in the past, and so that you can have a better solution for the problems that you may experience in the future. But, I think it's if you have a growth kind of mindset, it's all part of the process. You're going to take some L's in life. There's no such thing as an undefeated life, but it's how you respond to those and how you get back up and keep trying to figure out ways to win that really makes you a winner.
The other thing that he was talking about was at 12 years old, he couldn't score in a game. And then at 14, he was the best player in the state. What's funny is he talked about the gap, and the gap was his focus on the fundamentals. So while everyone else was relying on their athleticism, he was relentlessly focused on the fundamentals. And I relate to that because for a while, I didn't make my high school basketball team, and I kind of overcompensated by learning how to do trick push-ups and trick pull-ups and all this other stuff, but my wrist would hurt. And long story short, I stopped doing that stuff, relentlessly focused on running and basic fundamental reps. My strength improved, my speed improved, everything changed. What's your take on the fundamentals versus the flashy work?
Yeah, it's funny because the book that I just finished writing, it opens up with Jayson, Tatum, and Joel Embiid writing forwards. And Jayson, mentioned a little bit about our first work when he was 13 years old. He first talks about the first workout where I tested him mentally to the point where he had to throw up twice in the workout, our first workout at 13 years old. And then after that, we spent 4 days without shooting a basketball. Most kids at 13 years old would run out of the gym. All they want to do is things that are fun, things that look cool and might, be a great post on social media. But we locked in on, footwork. We just wanted to master, the jab that we had seen my favorite player, Michael Jordan, his favorite player, Kobe Bryant, do over and over and over again. So we went and watched film, and then we broke it down detail by detail, and we built up that jab. And I'll never forget, about 2 weeks later, he was matched up with this guy, Braxton Key. At the time, his name was Braxton Blackwell, but he changed his name later on. But Braxton Key, who ended up playing in the NBA, and it was another guy that I had worked with. Jayson hit him back-to-back, 2 jabs, and just rocked him. And I remember afterwards, I get a text after the game. He said, "Yo, So I asked Jay where he got that jab from. He said, that's all you guys have been working on. He's like, you got to help me out with it. And that's to me what the fundamentals are. It's about building kind of this base that you can trust so much that you can build on top of for layer after layer after layer. And so that's what the great ones do is they have this rock solid foundation that they can trust, they can rely on, and then they can build on top of it. And the things that they build on top of it, they get to choose. But if they don't have that fundamental foundation, it's hard to really build something sturdy, that you can rely on and trust when pressure is at its highest, which is when you need to be able to trust yourself the most.
I'm glad you brought up pressure. Mental resilience, mental fortitude, mental toughness, I know is a common theme. We talked about mental toughness, mental resilience. What's your take on mental toughness? What's the role that it's played in your career? How do you help players train their mental toughness?
I mean, I think mental toughness is so much so. You mentioned Kobe. Kobe used to always say that like it's 70% mental, 30% skill. I don't know what the exact breakdown is, but what I do know is it doesn't matter what you're capable of doing if you're not mentally capable of actually doing it. So if you're physically capable of doing stuff and you're mentally not capable of actually following through, putting in the work, trusting yourself, actually being able to apply the skills that you kind of have, then it doesn't matter. And so, I think that I spend just as much time on the mental side of the game. I spend just as much time on the emotional side of the game. And I know that it's what pushed me beyond where I thought I could possibly get to. I'm a 5'11" white American, which isn't the best necessarily hand that you could be dealt as a basketball enthusiast. But, I gave up sweets at 12 years old and didn't eat sweets until I was done playing college basketball at 22, just because I thought that all-in mentality, 100% easier than 90% of like fully committing to giving up sweets would help me out in some ways athletically. Me waking up at 4:59 a.m. and shooting 1,000 shots before school, that was my edge. I wasn't, the height wasn't my edge. Athleticism wasn't my edge. My heart was my edge. And so, I really think that, mental toughness to me is a lot different than physical toughness. I think a lot of times people these days, they're in the media talking about that player isn't tough because they don't throw hands, they don't fight, they don't. And to me, I think it's almost the opposite. I think sometimes it's, do you have the ability to dig deep and get a stop? Do you have the ability to push through an injury? Do you have the ability to push through when you're fatigued? Do you have the ability to rally your team and get them to do exactly what they need to do? That's toughness. And so in your life, toughness is about doing the things that you need to do to get the results that you say you want, And so that might mean somebody that wants to lose weight choosing not to eat that snack that they're desperately craving at late at night. That might be somebody waking up early and doing a workout when their day is stacked instead of making the excuse of, I had a busy day. For an athlete, that might mean, choosing the pain of waking up every morning and putting in work instead of the pain of crying after the season falling short every year. So I think that, obviously there's a ton of things that go into being a successful athlete, entrepreneur, mom, dad. I mean, to be successful in anything, you have to, pick and choose what you're going to sacrifice. But to me, it's a lot easier sacrificing, by putting in work and making the hard decisions now versus sacrificing by having to live with the regret of, not making those choices earlier on.
It's an awesome sentiment. I love how you talked about your heart as your competitive advantage, because that, in my view, Jay Billis was on the show also, and we talked about toughness, and he actually, I'm sure you've read it or heard of it, he wrote a book on toughness, and he wrote like an article on toughness that made rounds in the college space, and really was about what you were talking about, getting that stop digging deep, among a few other things. And toughness, as I see it, is really about that self-love, that positive self-talk. And then discipline is also what you talked about, naming those sacrifices, how you go about building those routines and understanding what you have to give up in order to get the thing that you're after. How were you able to build, outside of naming your sacrifices, how were you able to build such immense discipline at an early age, and how do you help players cultivate discipline now?
I mean, honestly, that's what my book is about. It's about, developing the mental toughness that you need to actually do what you need to do. It's about, identifying the one thing in your life that's holding you back and then putting together a blueprint that you can make little actionable steps to actually finally do the thing that that you need to do. And so when I look at it, it's all about that process. I think most people have these audacious goals. And so when they have these audacious goals, they definitely don't have the mental toughness to be able to like go all in and see themselves going from where they are to where they want to get to. My job as a coach has always been, how do I help these athletes deem whatever they're after as possible, breaking it into the smallest chunks possible. And then how do we create an actionable plan that allows them to get momentum enough so that they do have the confidence to follow through? They do have the connectivity to whatever that driving force is deep down inside of them to follow through. And it's something that I started out when I was an early age. I realized that 100% is easier than 90% that I talked about earlier. I really did. I mean, when I said I was going to do something, I followed through. And it didn't mean necessarily I started with the biggest, most outrageous kind of work plan. It might be something like, when I first started running in the mornings, it was like, hey, I am going to run in the mornings. I am a runner in the morning. And so it didn't say I was going to run a marathon in the morning. It didn't even say I was going to run 5 miles in the morning. I remember at the first, there was a school that was a private school up the street. And I would just run to the private school, touch the private school, and then run right back. And then, if you're feeling good, you run a little extra. But the habit of waking up and running became, a principle of my life. When I was eating sweets, I started off with a month. 1 month of not eating sweets. Trust me, day 3, day 4, as a 12-year-old, your friends are all, grabbing a McFlurry from McDonald's or, having a birthday cake at birthday parties back at that age. And you have to say no, that's a choice. But then after a month, it became a lot easier because it was just who I was. And so then, a decade goes by and I don't eat sweets, don't eat candy. Everyone was asking me, like, how do you do that? I'm like, I just chose not to eat sweets. And then it became part of who I was. And, now I'm 35. I've never tasted alcohol in my life. In the book, I tell a story about, me turning down $10,000 for one shot from one of my guys in a Las Vegas nightclub. And people are like, how do you say no to $10,000 for one shot? That one shot won't kill you. And I was like, of course it won't. But that's the problem. Most people leave that 10% gap that gives you an out. And I've never given myself an out. And I really do believe that if you just start small and build momentum, you'll build enough evidence and enough confidence that you'll be able to say, you know what? Listen, there is so much evidence that says I am not a drinker. I am not a sweet eater. I am a runner. I am a 5 a.m. meet at the gym, shoot 1,000 shot guy. And that's who you become. And so I think the problem is most people, when they set these goals, they set these plans, they don't become the person they need to become. They say what they want to do, but they don't become the person they need to become to show up every single day, even on the days they don't feel like it.
I love it. I absolutely love it. You're hyping me up. Thank God I did everything you're talking about this morning, because otherwise I had a morning before this. And it's exactly like you said. It's those early wake ups. It's you got a stacked day and you can make excuses for why you can't do the thing. Do you know Sahil Bloom?
Yeah, I've seen obviously his book roll out, which has been awesome. That's kind of what introduced me to him. And a good friend of mine, Ben Bruno, was the one that said, hey, you got to check this guy out. But
yeah,
no, I love it. Every morning, getting in the cold plunge and dunking and, doing the hard things now so he doesn't have to do the hard things later. I love all the messages that he shares on his platform.
I interviewed him the other day. The podcast is coming out in February with the launch of his book. And the dude would wake up 3:45 in the morning for 6 years to get to the gym at 4:30 or 4:30. And then spend an hour, do his thing at the office by 6:30, and he ends up meeting Tim Cook, who's CEO of Apple, and becomes a mentor. Tim Cook ends up being the guy that tells him to take the leap into the creator world, and now we all know who he is. But it's that discipline, right? It's the discipline that now looking at your career has put you in a position to work with multiple MVPs, work at the highest level, have this incredible level of discipline and resilience, practice what you preach, walk the damn walk, man. You're about it. And it's hard when players, I imagine it's hard when players see someone like you, regardless of their talent relative to yours, to not hold themselves accountable. I mean, it's inspiring, man. It's one of these things that you're simply about it. How have you been able to stay? I mean, not consistent, but how have you learned we talked about pressure. How have you learned to stay calm under pressure? How do you train players to stay calm under pressure?
Yeah, I mean, it's all comes into trusting the work that you put in. I am a big believer that self-confidence is overrated. I don't think you're born with self-confidence. I think you develop self-confidence, and I think that comes from evidence. If you're in a gym and you're shooting 1,000 shots a day and you're making 850 out of 1,000, you see the ball going 850 times. That is 850 reps that show you are capable of making this shot. So then when you get out there in the game, there is no it's I've done this, I do this, and you just trust the work that you put in. I think the opposite is true too, though. If you're underprepared, then you become overwhelmed. And I really do believe that that's how most people live their lives. Is they think they're prepared, but they're doing everything at the last minute to try to find that internal confidence to say, oh, you got this, you got this, you got this, or giving themselves pep talks instead of being so prepared that they don't need a pep talk. It's just, I do this, I've done this, and so that's how, to me, you cure pressure. I do think that obviously there's moments that, are heightened moments, big moments, championship moments, gold medal game moments. Anyone is going to feel that little extra jitter because it's like, wow, like I've worked so hard. This is the moment that I've been preparing for. This is the moment. But deep down, if you're prepared, you just trust yourself. And that's what it really comes down to. It's, I never worry when I walk into a nightclub. I'm never like, oh my God, is this the night that I'm going to break my drinking streak? Because I trust myself. Over and over again, I've said no to the most famous celebrities in the world, to money, there's nothing that's going to break me. And so I don't have to worry about it. There's no pressure, whereas a lot of individuals that go on a January dry streak, oh, new year, new me, I'm going to give up drinking for January. They're like, their friends call, hey, you want to go out tonight? They're like, nope, I don't want to go out, because they don't trust themselves. And then they go out and they're like, hey, do you want to drink? Nope, I don't want to drink. Then they put the drink in front of them, the shot in front of them. Come on, you're not going to pass on this one drink. And then they do it. They give in. They take that one drink. And then after that, they feel bad. And they say, you know what? I already broke my streak. I might as well have fun tonight. Now, pounding down shots. Next morning, woke up, hungover. And they're like, oh, I hate myself. I can never follow through. Then that's a Friday night. They say, you know what? I'll start again on Monday. Why not just start now? You made a mistake. You know what I mean? Don't let one lead to two. Nope. Saturday night, they go out, have a great time. Sunday, they wake up, feel like shit again. Monday, they start over, but inevitably, they're going to give up again. And so that's, to me, what pressure is. Pressure is over-preparing to the point where you just trust yourself so much that you might feel the heightened outside pressure, but internally, you're as strong as a rock just because you do believe that you have what it takes to get it done.
Who have been your biggest influences?
Yeah, I don't have this big name person that I can say oh man, this person changed my life. What I can say is my parents instilled a work ethic in me that was basically, if you want something, you got to go get it. And so I was one of those people that we grew up a middle-class family, but we didn't have any extra, money. It wasn't like we had a bunch of disposable income at our hand. And so it was one of those things where if I wanted new basketball shoes, I had to cut grass. I had to shovel snow. I had to do a lemonade stand, and it was one of those things that when I remember when I was 16 years old, I got a car with a big ass dent on the side of the driver's side. It had 200,000 miles on it. My dad paid $300 and a box of steaks. True story. And I never knew how much he paid. I knew it wasn't much. But then I remember I was like, hey, Pops, what did you pay? Like a couple $1,000s for that car? He goes, Drew, I paid $300 and a box of steaks. I said, whoa. And the car would not start if it rained, if it snowed, if it was too cold outside. I'm from St. Louis, so that was a lot of days where I had to get a jump start. I remember one of the best investments I ever made was one of those boxes that had the two cables, so I didn't have to ask people to jump start me. I could just jump start myself. But that's where all my resiliency came. Then I wanted a new car. I was one of the best players in Missouri. I won Missouri Player of the Year my senior year. I was like, I don't want to be picking up girls on dates and my car not start. I remember my junior year prom, I was picking up a girl and I pulled up and I left the car running and I walked up to the door and, be a gentleman. And I remember her dad being like, hey, turn off the car, come inside for a little bit. And I was like, oh, it's all good. I'll come inside, but I'll just, it's all good. And he's like, no, don't waste gas. And I was like, wanted to be like, hey man, you don't know, like this car might start, you might be jumping us here in a second. And so I remember I turn off the car, I go inside, I'm younger, I'm listening to the dad, and I go spend 15 minutes inside. And I remember when we were walking out, and she's in her nice dress, I'm in my, probably rented suit at the time, and we're walking out, and I'm the whole way walking up to my car. I'm like, please start, please start, please start, please start, please start. That's all I could think about. And I was like, do I open the door for her and put her in the car and not know if the car starts? Do I try to start the car and then open the door for her? That's where everything came for me, is I wanted things and then I craved them so badly that it fueled me to do everything, And so I really do. I want a new car, and that's why I started wanting to get a job. And then that job led me to doing training. Believe it or not, the way I started training was I wanted to be a referee because referees made $18 an hour. And I showed up and he was like, listen, you can't be a referee because you don't have the credentials. I was like, well, I promise you, I can do a better job than the refs that ref me and mess my good games up all the time. He's like, I understand that, but you can't. He's like, listen, all my kids that I coach, they all know who you are. They all love watching you play. Why don't you coach them? I waited for a second. He's like, I'll give you the $18 an hour you're after. So I was like, perfect. I'm coaching now. Went from refereeing before I ever did. I retired before I ever ref one game from refereeing, and then I started coaching. And then when I was coaching, I was at the facility that I was coaching at, and I started working out myself one day. And there was 3 courts. I was on court 3, court 1 and 2. There were games going on, and court 2 had a kid that was playing not up to his dad's liking. And George Baker, the dad, came over to me and said, I've never seen somebody work as hard as you're working. I literally had my hands on my knees, bent over, dripping in sweat. He startled me. He tapped me on the shoulder. I kind of jumped. And he was like, I'll pay you $20 to put my son through that exact workout I just saw you put, yourself through. And boom, that's how my training career started. And so I really do think that my need for a new car led me to relentlessly pursuing how to make money, which led me to relentlessly working on my own game in the gym that I had access to, which led me to training, which led me to everything that I'm doing now. And so I think that's what people need is they need some internal motivation to fuel their action. And I think most people don't have that. My dad for years would not get in shape. He was over 300 pounds at 6 foot, not healthy at all. And I would tell him that it didn't matter. Well, then one day, I had a hard conversation with him in the driveway where I was like, Pops, you don't understand that you are headed down a path that is the same path that your dad, my grandpa, went down. You know the pain that your mom, his mom, my grandma, wakes up every day with because she does not have her soulmate in her life anymore because he passed away a decade before he should have because his liver failed? Well, that's the path you're going down. Mom, my mom, your wife is going to have to wake up with that same pain. You know the pain that every single, birthday that you go and take a shot at his gravesite, do you realize you could be having that shot with him if he made different choices? Well, guess what? I'm not going to have shots with you, but I'm going to have to go to your gravesite and visit you if you make these choices continuously over the next couple of years. And I hit him in the heart because he didn't care if he had a six-pack anymore. And guess what? The next morning he started walking, and that led to a journey where he lost 90 pounds in one calendar year. That to me is, I don't think there's a motivator that is constantly pushing me, pulling me, giving me motivational text messages in the morning. To me, it's just, what do you want? And if you want it bad enough, you're willing to do whatever it takes to get it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Inspired. My name is Jonathan Cohen, and I have a quick favor to ask you. If you're getting any value out of this content, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. You help us reach more people, and you can also stay up to date with all the latest content coming your way. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's intrinsic motivation. It's that alignment. It's a straight line method, I call it. It's where your actions, what you say, what you do, what you want, everything lines up, straight line through. Having that clarity gives you direction. And when you're uncertain about it, you're not going to stay committed. It's not that all-in type of approach, and you're going to leave energy on the table. It's an immense story. How you've inspired your family, how you've inspired other players, how you follow through on the things that you say that you're going to do. That is what builds confidence, right? Evidence. I mean, obviously that resonates. I hold the same type of approach. I'm a lawyer by trade, and all I do is talk about how confidence is about establishing evidence. And that burden of proof is on you. You have to be able to establish it for yourself, and no one can give that to you. You have to put out those stones and leverage it. It's like building a monument to your failure in a way, but also a monument to your accolades in the sense that when you give yourself enough proof, right? Like, I am a runner because I run. If you feel good, a little bit further. If you don't feel as good, you're still getting up to run. This morning, the wind was barking so loud. And it was one of those things where it's like, you know what, maybe I'll just skip the run and I'll just do the lift instead. I'm like, I'll just start rationalizing, putting I'll read more, I'll get ahead on this. But it's like, I don't mind getting ahead, reading more, doing any of those other things. But the second my mind starts to cop out, that's where I'm like, that's the thing I need to do. That's the standard that I hold myself to. And when I'm not living by that standard, I don't feel alignment with who I am. That motivation, that intrinsic motivation, doesn't allow me to perform at my highest level, because if I cop out there, where else am I going to cop out? Not just in the day, but in the week, maybe later in the month. Maybe it'll be subtle. Maybe it'll be the sweet. Maybe it'll be, what time I show up for work. Maybe it'll be how I show up in my family. I believe in standards. I believe in holding yourself to a certain threshold and then incrementally raising it over time. I want to ask you about, kind of switching gears a bit, in all the high performers that you've worked with, athletes, professionals across the board. You mentioned Joel Embiid, you mentioned Tatum. What are some of the common threads that you notice in your experience in working with people, not just NBA players, but in your life and in your experience? What are some of the common threads amongst the high performers?
I would say there's three things that I think that really stand out. When you talk about these elite athletes, elite entrepreneurs, anybody that has found a high level of success, I think the first thing is they fall in love with whatever they do. Whether that's a sport, whether that's a business, whether that's, a passionate parent. But the first thing that is required to be super successful, I believe you have to love what you're after, because there's going to be a ton of moments where you don't want to put in the extra work. There's going to be a ton of times where you hit plateaus that you got to climb out of and over. There's going to be a ton of times where there's roadblocks or setbacks, and you have to be able to bounce back or find solutions for those problems. And if you don't love it, you're not going to dig deep enough to get past those moments of tough times. So the first thing is they have to love it. Second thing is they have to crave criticism, coaching, feedback. They are constant lifelong learners. When you look at these great athletes, they are constantly striving to be better. So cool. In Jayson's forward, the last line, because he just won a championship with the Celtics, was when you reach the top of the mountain, that's when the climb starts. And it's like, man, like how cool is that? Like, I remember when he won the championship, so many people being like, now it's time to tell your story. And he's like, I'm just getting started. I'm just starting climbing. Like, you know what I mean? And I think that's the mindset that all these great special ones, outcasts, like that's what they do. They constantly are finding ways to improve themselves. You talked about Kobe earlier, the Mamba mentality, literally the definition of it was the quest to become one's best self, And so that's the second thing they do is they crave coaching, crave criticism. And then the third thing to me is what I call the unseen hours. The unseen hours are when you're by yourself, when no one's watching, no one's holding you accountable. What do you do during those moments? Do you follow through with your actions? Do you cheat yourself? Do you, go all in when you say you're going to go all in? But what does the work look like? What are the choices that you make? What are the decisions and actions you do when no one's watching, when no one's holding you accountable, when no one's applauding you? But I think those are the three things that they do is, they make sure that they fall in love with whatever they're after. They crave that coaching and criticism so they can constantly tap into levels they can't tap into themselves. And then the third thing is they love those unseen hours, because those are the moments that separate them from everybody else that cheats during those moments and ultimately ends up cheating themselves.
When you've worked with people that are kind of in their own head and don't have that confidence, right? We talked about evidence in terms of building confidence, but, say a Ben Simmons kind of situation where the yips happen, or one of those situations where, say someone wants to give a presentation and they're in their own head, they get performance anxiety. How have you helped people navigate those situations?
I mean, the first thing that you do is you have to take a step back. Like there's a old thing that like sometimes when you're holding, your hand too close to your face, you can't see the surroundings. And I think that's the first thing you do. And so I would go to the complete opposite of what most people do. Most people, if you had a big presentation, would be like, hey, it's okay. You're not going to fail. And I would go to the opposite. I would say, hey, what if you fail? Like, what if you have the worst what happens? What changes in your world? Does somebody get shot? No, no one gets shot. Okay. Do you lose your life in it? No, you don't. Okay. Like I would go that route and then just realize, again, the evidence says this isn't as big as you think it is. I know that you think that, I know that this might mean a lot to you, but this isn't as big as you think it is. This is not life or death. So that's the first thing I would do is the evidence states that this is way less than what you're making it up to be. Second thing is I would go to the proof. Okay, let's find, times where you've talked to 10 people. Let's talk to 15 people. It's times that you stood up in front of your class and talked. It's times that you stood up in front of a camp and talked. Okay, you've done this before. You can do this again. And then the last thing would be just making sure that obviously if I had them for a while, it would just be getting to the point where they knew that speech like this, where I'd say, listen, I've heard it 10 times. All 10 times have been great. If it's been great 10 out of 10 times, that means there's 100% chance that this one's going to be good as well. And so it's tricking your mind, and it's not even tricking your mind. It's convincing your mind that everything's going to be okay if you do fail, but you're not going to fail because you've put in the work, you've trusted yourself, et cetera. And so that's what I do all the time with athletes. In the NBA, every penny is guaranteed. Every penny once you sign a contract. And so if you have a guaranteed contract, I'm like, listen, there's no financial pressure. No one, this is not life or death. What this is a game. This is a game of basketball that you picked up probably at 3 years old. You played it because you loved it when you were younger. You got really, really good at it because you worked at it. And so something was there. The reason you're in the NBA is somebody somewhere along the way thought you were good. Then other people thought you were good. Then the majority of people thought you were good. Then you were good enough to get drafted. Then you were good enough to make the team. Then you were good enough to get paid. And then again, all that evidence says you got something in you that people want. There's a reason people drafted you. There's a reason people selected you. There's a reason people paid you. And that's what it is. And it's not an easy process. It's not as easy as having that conversation and be like, all right, go get him, champ. You know what I mean? It takes a while to, replace years of negativity. There was a study that I came across that when I was writing my book, if you spend basically 110 seconds, so just under 2 minutes with a negative person, negative environment, it changes you literally inside. So I'm like, imagine if you have years and years of negativity, whether that's negative circle around you, whether it's a negative mindset internally, whether that's negative emotions. I mean, all these negative experiences, it builds up, it weighs on you. So, there's a whole section in my book called Make Peace with Your Past. And that's where I start with anybody that doubts themselves, is you have to make peace with your past, because if not, then your past is going to keep messing up your current situation and your future. And so I think that's what people have to do, is they have to unravel what is causing them to stay stuck. What is causing them to have these negative mindsets? What is causing them to have the doubt and insecurity that is driving, all the actions and decisions in their life? And when they can replace their past with, meaningful moments that allow them to escape that and break free from it, that's when true success can start happening in the now and the future.
You put the framework that you outlined earlier into action, where it was about that intrinsic motivation, the evidence, and the actual reps and the preparation. And then you followed it up with embracing your past. That, for me, I learned it from David Goggins. The man sent me down a path of running like marathons and ultra marathons. Like, thanks for all that. But, it's one of those things where you learn how to deal with doubt, and you have to figure out what truly is motivating you. And sometimes it's that chip on your shoulder from when you were younger. But at the same time, like for you, it was getting a car for you. And then the car catapulted you to now, being number one NBA skills coach in the entire world. It's one of those things that the level of proficiency comes from acceptance and understanding who you are, so you could make enough space. Viktor Frankl talks about it in his book, A Man's Search for Meaning. And my interpretation of it is, when someone leaves your life, it makes room for everything else that you have to accomplish. We have a finite amount of bandwidth, and sometimes that person is the past version of you, and you have to let that person go. You're not like pretending it didn't happen. It's just embracing that part of you so you can make space for everything else you have left to accomplish. And I love how you made it a point to talk about, because that self-acceptance leads to high performance, because there's more space for the performance. You could take in more skills, you could take in more reps, you can focus and be present on what's in front of you. So as we round this thing out, I got 2 more questions for you. What do you think is the difference in your experience between the leap that a player takes, or a high performer takes, between elite athlete to MVP status? What do you think that jump is really about, and having worked with MVPs yourself?
Obviously there's a million things that go into it. Obviously some of it is talent, some of it is skill, some of it is mindset, some of it is confidence, some of it is opportunity. All those things kind of, throw them in a blender, and you have to have the perfect kind of sauce out of all of those things. But, I really do think the mentality is one of the things that puts you over top. Because whenever you go up to another level, a lot of times it's not necessarily, you might add a skill here or there that really helps you out. You might improve your game or add a dynamic that makes you a little bit, better of a player. But really, it takes to get to the top, the peak of the peak. It takes a mentality that is so different. Joel in his forward, talks about his MVP season. He was like, man, I didn't think I was going to get it. So I almost was about to shut it down. And he's like, and Drew was the asshole that was, constantly sending me box scores from other MVP contenders, was constantly, chirping at him, was constant. And I was like, dude, you can get this. Do you realize how cool it's going to be when you can tell your son that your dad was the baddest basketball player on planet Earth one season? Like, can you believe that? Like, and then he wins the scoring title and the MVP in the same season. It's just like, come on, man, we got this. The difference between him averaging 33 a game and him averaging 30 a game was the difference between him winning scoring title and him winning MVP versus him not. 3 points, like 3 points. And it's crazy because, like, me, if I subbed into a game for 10 minutes, I could score 3 points. And that was the gap between, being runner-up, which he had done twice in his career, and being the MVP. And so I don't think people realize how close they are to getting that next level. Now, I'm not saying you're going to go from, somebody that is struggling paycheck to paycheck to a billionaire, Elon Musk status. I'm saying the next level, whatever that next level is for you. And so you got to crack the code and push yourself and convince yourself that next level is possible. That's the first step. And then you got to go all in with like this relentless mentality that is like, you know what? I might fall on my face, but that's okay. I am going to see what I'm really, truly capable of. But I think that most people, they just constantly just throw out safety nets all over the place. Like, even when I ask kids all the time at camps, I say, how many of you guys would like to play college basketball? 100 out of 100 hands normally go up. Maybe 95 because there might be 5 shy kids that, just don't put their hands up. Then I say, how many of you guys think if you keep working and doing the exact same thing that you're currently doing, how many of you guys think you'll play college basketball? 90 hands drop. 5 hands on a good day remain. And I say, do you realize that if you had your hand up, I want to play college basketball, and then now you have your hand down, but I know I'm not doing enough to get there, you realize you're just setting yourself up for failure. You're letting yourself down. It's the same thing for somebody that says, hey, I want to lose 50 pounds. Okay, great. Now, are you willing to do this, which is required to lose 50 pounds? No, I'm not willing to do that. Okay, so you don't really want to lose 50 pounds. It just sounds good. And so that's what people have to do, is they have to really reframe the question from what do you want, because that doesn't really matter, to what do you need to do to get to what you want or where you want, and then are you willing to do that? Because that's the real question that matters. And so that's what I would say, is I think that people need to start reframing things instead of, I want more money. Great. Are you willing to do this, and this? That's the real question. It's not, do you want more money? It's, are you willing to do that? I want this body. Okay. Are you willing to do this, and this? That's the real question. So that's what I constantly try to tap into, is when somebody says, hey, I want to make a run at this MVP. Do you really want that? It's going to require you to go through hell. And as you know, if you stop in hell, you're going to stay in hell. You got to get through it. And that means there's going to be a lot of days where you don't feel like going out and getting buckets, and you got to get buckets. There's going to be days where you don't feel like lifting weights. You got to lift weights. There's going to be meals that, that comfort food looks so good, but you got to skip it. Like, are you really willing to do that? Because if you are, then we have a chance. And that's the part that people don't like. Even if you do everything perfect, it's not guaranteed, but it does give you a chance. And if you don't do everything, it's guaranteed that you won't get it.
Comes down to action, comes down to discipline, naming those sacrifices. But as you outline, asking the right questions, making sure that you're putting yourself in a position where you're managing your expectations, but asking the right questions to set those expectations. Drew, this has been awesome. I'm so amped for the book. I got one more question for you that I asked to all my guests, and I'm not going to pose to you. If the future version of yourself from 10 years from now were to fly in and offer you some advice in order to get there, what do you think he would say to you?
Honestly, I think you would say, just keep going. I really do. People ask me all the time, if my current self went back and talked to my younger self that just started training, what would you do differently? And I was like, there's a million things I would do differently from a business standpoint. But the one thing that I've always loved is my grandma said a quote to me years ago. She's like, Drew, you're never going to have everything you want, but you're always going to have more than you need. And if you keep that perspective, everything's going to be okay. And so, are there things 10 years from now that my future self would tell me business-wise to make me a little more money? Of course. Are there things that they would tell me health wise to make my body even better, whether that's stretch more or do something to prevent future injuries, of course, but I think that the biggest thing my future self would say is just keep choosing happiness, keep choosing internal peace, and let external success follow. I think that too many people are after external things that don't bring them that inner peace that we're truly should be, after. And I think that for me, the one change that I've made from early on in my career was going from chasing all these things to really trying to fill myself up inside where I feel really, really good about, waking up every morning, the people that I surround myself with, the things that I'm doing, the impact I'm making. And so that's what I think my future self would say is just keep doing what you're doing, keep choosing internal peace over external success. And if you do that, you have a chance to do both.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Drew Hanlon, how can people keep up with your journey?
Easy, drewhanlon.com, Drew Hanlon on all socials. And obviously, I'm looking forward to not only the book launch in February, but I'm really looking forward to 9 months after the book launch when, I'm starting to get the emails from people, the DMs from people that say, like, wow, like, I heard you on a podcast. I thought you were like every other author just trying to sell me a book. Like, this actually transformed my game, my business, my life, my body, whatever it is they're after. So I'm really excited to see people read and stop bullshitting yourself and to actually stop bullshitting themselves. Like, it was funny because I wrestled with the publisher. They did not want to put a cuss word in the title. They're like, there's going to be some news segments that can't put it. There's going to be some youth organizations that can't put it. And I'm like, do you know what people need to really take their life to the next level? They need to stop bullshitting themselves. They know exactly what they need to do. They just got to stop bullshitting themselves. They got to stop giving themselves a hall pass. They got to stop cutting corners. They got to stop taking the easy route. They got to start having the hard conversations they're avoiding. And so that's why I kept the name in the title. I said, I don't care if I sell less books. When people see it, they're going to know if they need it or not. And I write a letter in the book to the reader, and it literally starts, if you picked up this book, it's because somewhere deep down, you've been bullshitting yourself in some areas of your life. It's time to tackle whatever you've been bullshitting about. And that's what I think the book will do for people.
Staying true to that intrinsic motivation and practicing what he preaches. Thank you so much for the time, man.
Awesome. Appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.